In the annals of history, where humanity has recorded its greatest achievements and its deepest falls, we often encounter dark pages dedicated to unimaginable cruelty. If the architects of empires at times built their states on pyramids of skulls, then systems of justice, in their pursuit of absolute control and intimidation, gave rise to monstrous methods of execution. These instruments of power, designed not only to take a life, but also to demonstrate unlimited force, turned death into an agonizing spectacle. They reflected not just an ingenuity in inflicting suffering, but also a profound understanding of human fears, as well as a desire to subjugate the will and body of the victim until the very last breath. Today, we will delve into the world of the most sophisticated and horrifying methods of execution, exploring not only their monstrous nature, but also how they served the goals of power and justice in different eras. Execution by elephant, India from antiquity to the 19th century. In the hot lands of South Asia, where elephants were revered as sacred animals and served as powerful instruments of war, they also became the silent executioners of death sentences. The condemned, whose fate had been decided, was placed on the ground, and a specially trained war elephant was led to him. The elephant, an animal of enormous strength and intelligence, could instantly crush a head or chest, ending a life in a single moment. More often, however, it was trained differently. It would slowly, methodically begin to crush the limbs, gradually approaching the vital organs, stretching the victim's agony out for hours. This execution by elephant was not merely an act of taking a life, but a shocking spectacle of absolute control. This horrifying practice served as a potent symbol of monarchical power and its unshakable authority. In cultures where elephants were associated with royalty and divine majesty, using such an animal for an execution emphasized not only the ruler's strength, but also his ability to command even the mighty forces of nature. Execution by elephant was a powerful tool of intimidation that required no complex engineering equipment or numerous executioners. The beast itself, guided by a single mahout, acted as a living embodiment of merciless justice, demonstrating to the public that any attempt at disobedience would be crushed as relentlessly and inevitably as the body of the condemned.
Execution by reed. Ancient Mesopotamia and Southeast Asia from antiquity. Among the ancient and seemingly simple methods, execution by reed stands out for its sophisticated cruelty, using natural processes for a slow and torturous death. The victim was securely tied to the ground over a barely sprouted yet sharp shoot of bamboo or another fast-growing reed. Bamboo is known for its phenomenal growth rate. Some species can grow up to a meter in a day. Its young stalks are incredibly sharp and hard, like a dagger. Over the course of several days, this living dagger would slowly but inexorably pierce through the victim's body, causing unbearable pain and slowly destroying internal organs. This execution, seemingly passive, was in fact the highest degree of psychological and physical torture. It demonstrated the absolute helplessness of a person before the forces of nature, which, under the control of justice, became an instrument of retribution. In societies closely connected to agriculture and natural cycles, the use of a fast-growing plant could have deep symbolic meaning, turning the life that springs from the earth into a source of slow death. From a technical standpoint, this method required no complex tools, only knowledge of the biological characteristics of plants and the ability to securely restrain the victim, making it an accessible and effective means of intimidation in pre-industrial societies.
The resin mask, Byzantium, Middle Ages. In the Byzantine Empire, known for its complex system of justice and, at times, elaborate punishments, there existed a method that combined torture, execution, and public humiliation: the resin mask. A tight metal or leather mask was placed over the criminal's head, fitting snugly around the face. Then, through a special opening, boiling resin, molten wax, or scalding lead was poured inside the mask. The victim died from asphyxiation and horrific
burns, while their face, encased in the mask, was deformed by the pressure and heat. This method was designed not only for immediate execution, but also for maximum intimidation and humiliation. The face, as the center of human individuality, was subjected to complete annihilation, which in some cultures could be considered an obstacle to passage into the afterlife, or a symbol of the complete erasure of one's identity. The resin mask was a striking example of how advanced knowledge of metallurgy and the properties of materials for its time was used to create the most agonizing and psychologically crushing method of execution. It was used in cases where it was necessary not just to kill, but to completely depersonalize the criminal, leaving behind only a disfigured mask as a grim warning.
The Witch's Tree, Europe, 16th to 17th centuries. In the early modern period, when Europe was gripped by paranoia and mass persecutions of witches, methods of execution emerged that were as savage as the superstitions of the time. The Witch's Tree was one of the most brutal and spectacular. The condemned, most often someone suspected of witchcraft, was tied to two young but strong trees, usually willows or birches, which had been bent down beforehand and secured in a taut position. The victim's body was positioned between the trunks. Then the bindings were released and the trees straightened with colossal force, tearing the person's body in half. This execution embodied the primal fear of the supernatural and the desire to cleanse society of heresy by any means necessary. The use of nature's power, in this case the elasticity and strength of a tree, to tear a body apart, carried a deep symbolic meaning. It was meant to break or destroy the evil within the person, associated with a supposed connection to the devil. From an engineering perspective, the method utilized a simple mechanical property, the stored potential energy of a bent tree, turning it into a powerful lever of destruction. It was a public, shocking spectacle, designed not only to punish, but also to instill terror in the hearts of witnesses, convincing them of the reality of evil forces and the mercilessness of justice.
Execution by rats, South America, colonial era. In the dark times of colonial rule in South America, when cruelty often knew no bounds, execution by rats was invented, a method that played on a person's instinctual fear of rodents and combined physical pain with unbearable psychological pressure. The prisoner was tied to a surface, their abdomen exposed. A heavy ceramic or metal bowl containing hungry rats was placed on the stomach, and then the bowl was tightly covered and began to be heated with coals. Seeking a way out of the scorching trap, the rats, seeing no other path, would begin to gnaw their way into the victim's body, causing excruciating suffering as the person slowly died from internal bleeding and organ damage. This execution was the quintessence of inhuman ingenuity, born in conditions where human life was valued extremely little, and the goal was the complete breaking of will and body. It demonstrated the absolute superiority of the colonial power, a willingness to use even the most loathsome creatures to maintain control. Technically, the method was based on knowledge of instinctive animal behavior and the application of heat, which drove the rats to desperate actions. This was an exemplary punishment designed to crush resistance and instill terror of the conqueror's omnipotence, leaving behind not only death, but also a deep scar of psychological trauma.
These methods of execution, separated by centuries and continents, are united by one thing. They were not simply ways of taking a life, but powerful instruments of power and intimidation. They show how the human mind, in its quest for control, could invent not only tools of creation, but also instruments of unimaginable suffering. Their legacy forces us to remember that behind the screen of justice and maintaining order, the darkest manifestations of human nature sometimes lurked. They remind us of the fine line between the need to punish and the desire to dominate, between lawful retribution and a sadistic demonstration of force. These stories are a stark warning about how absolute power, in any form, can give birth to monstrous methods if it is not constrained by ethics and compassion. They compel us to reflect on the price of order and on how easily one can cross the line that separates justice from barbarism.